Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 246, Enlighten Up. The episode begins with Ash and the gang on their way to Blackthorn City still, when they come across a lake, which Brock reads in his guidebook is known as Lake Slowpoke, known alternatively as Lake Enlightenment. Ash was confused as to what enlightenment meant, leading Brock to explain it was apparently like solving a riddle that reveals the truth. Ash and Misty were both confused by this, leading Brock to reveal that he was simply just speaking in a riddle to prove his point, and he explains enlightenment better. Essentially, enlightenment was when a person reaches their peak condition, either spiritually, physically, usually spiritually. Ash and the gang then happily examined the lake, noting how it was the first one in a long time, and it would probably be the last one for a while, so they decided to make use of it and rest there. But before they could rest, they were then interrupted as Team Rocket emerged from a hole that they had dug. Ash and the gang are surprised to see Team Rocket appear this early on in the goddamn episode, and question why they had dug themselves a hole, leading Team Rocket to reveal that they planned to keep themselves hidden in the hole, and then when they noticed that Ash and the gang and Pikachu showed up, they would pop out, and that's exactly what they did. Brock joked, tired of them by now, that Team Rocket should dig themselves a hole and simply stay in it, and never come out. Team Rocket were angered by this, and they of course wanted Pikachu, so they demanded a battle with Ash, and Ash accepted, wanting to kick their asses. However, before Ash or Jesse or James could send out Amon, Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of its ball, leading Jesse to recall it. The battle was then interrupted a second time, as a Slowpoke with a yellow flag then showed up, and sat on a rock right in the middle of Ash and the gang and Team Rocket, preventing them from battling, as the Slowpoke then dipped its tail in the water, attempting to fish. The Slowpoke was completely oblivious to the battle that was about to occur, and it was also oblivious as Ash pulled out its Pokedex and analyzed it. Team Rocket began to scold the Slowpoke for interrupting the battle, when suddenly a religious lady named Madeline came up, having been running after Slowpoke, looking for it. She then accuses Ash and the gang of Team Rocket for trespassing, since this was Slowpoke's favorite spot. Although she admitted that there was nothing unusual about the spot, but that didn't matter, as it's where Slowpoke wanted to be, so it deserved to be there alone, insinuating that she must have really cared about the Slowpoke, or really held it in high value, to allow it to do whatever the fuck it wanted. Ash and the gang then questioned why the Slowpoke was just sitting in the middle of the rock, doing almost nothing aside from fishing, leading the woman to reveal that the Slowpoke was pondering the meaning of existence, just as she did, and all of the other people who stayed at her temple, known as the Slowpoke Temple, explaining that the temple's entire purpose was to give people a place to ponder their own existence. Ash and the gang didn't think the Slowpoke was pondering anything as deep as its own existence, because it was just a fucking Slowpoke, reminding Madeline that Slowpoke were supposed to be dumb as fuck. But Madeline responded that this just further proved that the Slowpoke was probably thinking of some very deep shit, as it always seemed unfocused and distracted, and added that it was probably thinking about why it was a dumb Slowpoke in the first place. Madeline then added that Slowpoke was essentially not questioning why it was a Slowpoke, but it was questioning who it was on the inside. Ash retorted that it simply just was a Slowpoke, but Madeline then tried to get Ash to see her perspective by asking him what his name was and who he was on the inside. Ash responded revealing his name, though admitted that he wasn't sure how he would describe himself on the inside, which just proved Madeline's point that it was hard for people in Pokemon to know who they truly were on the inside, so that's why they had to ponder about it. Further stating that the Slowpoke must have known that the name Slowpoke was merely a name given to it by humans, so its name didn't matter, and it instead wanted to focus on who it really was on the inside. Madeline then tries to get Brock, Misty, Jesse, and James to more deeply understand themselves as opposed to just their names, as she asked them who they were on the inside. Although much to her disappointment, further proving her point that more of humanity needed to be like the Slowpoke and ponder about their existence, neither Misty, Brock, or Team Rocket could talk about who they were on the inside. They only knew their names, and were unsure about their own personalities and how they would describe them, only giving vague descriptors of themselves, such as Brock and Misty stating where they were from, Jesse calling herself beautiful, and James calling himself not nearly as egotistical as Jesse. Since Madeline was disappointed by this, when Brock proceeded to introduce himself to her and flirt with her when he revealed his name, Madeline obviously ignored his advances. Madeline then suggested that Ash and the gang and Team Rocket join her at the Slowpoke Temple so that they can learn more about enlightenment and learn more about themselves, just as she was, knowing that learning more about enlightenment and training to achieve it would be necessary because of how hard becoming enlightened was. Admitting that although she was super harsh on others to become enlightened, she had not become enlightened herself yet, even after looking for 10 years to become enlightened, shocking Ash and the gang that she was that dedicated to continue for 10 years at the Slowpoke Temple. Ash and the gang seemed hesitant to go to the Slowpoke Temple, as they had come to the conclusion that all of the people must have viewed Slowpoke as some type of god that was really trying to become enlightened, and they respected it for that, and they just found that weird because, they didn't think the Slowpoke had the mental capacity to want to become enlightened and all that shit, so they basically just didn't want to go. However, when Madeline offered that they could at least stay at the temple for lunch, Team Rocket was very intrigued by this due to how hungry they were, so they decided to go, leading Ash and the gang to go as well, to make sure that Team Rocket wouldn't cause any trouble. And Ash was a little intrigued by what this training entailed, he couldn't lie. Eventually, Madeline was able to lead Ash and the gang and Team Rocket to the entrance of the Slowpoke Temple, and explains that she was going to give them a little tour of the outside. Before arriving at the first destination, Madeline explains the history and the founding of the Slowpoke Temple, explaining that one day a priest meditated in the area with many Slowpokes many years ago and achieved enlightenment in the process, and in his honor, the temple was built. Essentially, since this guy had achieved enlightenment surrounded by Slowpoke, all of these other people now essentially followed a Slowpoke religion, believing that Slowpoke could help them achieve enlightenment as well. And that was related to the first destination of the tour, which was a huge golden Slowpoke statue, which was in the center of the temple complex. Team Rocket were immensely shocked upon seeing the gold Slowpoke statue and thought about giving it to Giovanni so that they could get a whole bunch of rewards from all the money that they would receive, such as a huge meal of their own. So, with that, Team Rocket decided to try and steal the gold Slowpoke statue when no one was looking. But first, it was time to have the lunch that Madeline was going to treat them to, which was a huge salad lunch. After the lunch, Madeline suggests that it was now time for the enlightenment training, explaining that there were currently several classes going on related to enlightenment, and also gassing up a trainee who had come to do some training known as Gary Oak, who had apparently done really well in enlightenment training. Upon hearing this, this motivated Ash more than ever to do this enlightenment training to show up Gary and prove that he was better than him, which Brock and Misty were definitely expecting. As for Team Rocket, they proceed to accept the training request as well when they thought about giving the gold Slowpoke statue to Giovanni again, having a fantasy about getting rich from it, and they essentially realized that if they were going to stay in the temple so that they could retrieve the statue, they would have to do training first, so that's why they agreed. Misty stated her correct doubts at Team Rocket that they must have had a plan up their sleeve and weren't just wanting to train for purely enlightenment reasons, but Team Rocket denied this, claiming that they wanted to learn more about themselves so they could find out why they were so drawn to being evil. Madeline responded by stating that she would definitely allow Team Rocket to do the enlightenment training as well, even if they were evil, because she really wanted Team Rocket to learn about themselves and why they partook in these evil habits, apparently. This cheered up Team Rocket, who was practically crying, begging Madeline to let them do the training. But Team Rocket's happiness was soon taken away once again, as Wobbuffet forcibly popped out its Pokeball, forcing Jessie to recall it. And then Madeline declared that it was time for the enlightenment training to begin, and added that it would be a lot of work as she took them to the meditation room with a whole bunch of other students meditating for their first training test, with some people even practicing with their Pokemon, including a Butterfree, a Hitmonlee, and a Hitmonchan. Madeline explains that the goal of the meditation was for Ash and the gang of Team Rocket to sit in a circle with the rest of the students and try and get deep into their thoughts without being interrupted by anything. As if on cue, a large wooden plank fell from the ceiling after a random student had accidentally moved, and this hit a guy, but the guy showed no reaction to this, showing how deep in thought he was. So Ash and the gang saw that the goal of meditation was to stay still and be quiet and try and master your thoughts, focusing in on them. Ash and the gang and Team Rocket initially couldn't think of anything, as they weren't used to a practice like this, but Ash soon thought about winning the Johto League and all of the joy that would come with it. But he became so excited about this that he shouted out loud, and this caused him to be slapped on the neck by a wooden plank by one of the priests watching. As for Misty, she thought about catching an undiscovered legendary water Pokemon, and Brock thought about chasing many beautiful girls, including Madeline. And as a result of these thoughts, Misty and Brock get hit by a plank as well, since they also shouted them out loud, especially Brock, who was essentially in a trance from being in love so much. Team Rocket, on the other hand, were completely struggling to think of any thoughts whatsoever, leading a man to hit them with a wooden plank so that he could essentially force thoughts into them somehow, but Team Rocket were against this as they proceeded to scold the man for doing so, which just got them into more trouble, and getting slapped even more by the plank. While all this was happening, Slowpoke was still fucking fishing by the lake. Anyways, Ash eventually declared once the meditation was over that it was difficult as fuck, and suggested that they move on to the next training task. So Madeline agreed to do this, and told them that the next task should be relatively easier for all of them, which was to scrub and wax the entire hallway of the temple. Specifically, the floors, and utilizing a mop. Misty, Brock, Jessie, and James rebutted that this job was not going to be easier whatsoever, as the hallway was fucking huge, and groaned in annoyance, but Ash declared that the training wasn't going to be over until they started, so he decided to get to work before everyone else, scrubbing like a madman, and dashing down the hallway. Upon seeing Ash doing all the work, Team Rocket get motivated to not get shown up by him, and begin cleaning as well, challenging Ash to a race to see who could do better, even though Madeline told them to take their time. And to be fair, I can see why they didn't want to take their time, because it was going to take so long. But anyways, Misty and Brock eventually joined in as well, while Togepi and Pikachu cheered for Ash, Brock, and Misty. Team Rocket had achieved the lead, despite Ash initially being the one starting off, while Ash was in second place, behind Jessie and James, and Misty, Brock, and Meowth were all trailing behind. However, Ash manages to take the lead from Team Rocket once they all turn into a hall, and Ash runs across the wall, get it from the momentum from the turn, which in turn gives him more speed, allowing him to take the lead. First overtaking Jessie, then overtaking James. Ash is able to maintain the lead until all of the cleaning was done, meaning that he had won the race, as he and Pikachu celebrated, and Team Rocket were tired and fuming with anger, while Misty and Brock were just tired and happy that the job was now done, as all of the floors had been cleaned. Madeline came up to them, though, and admitted that although the race was entertaining, they weren't quite done cleaning yet, showing them that since they were all going so fast, they had left behind several spots, and proved this by showing them several dirty spots on the floor, including marks that looked relatively dirty. With that, Ash and the gang and Team Rocket were forced to clean the floors again, this time without racing, and doing it more slowly and properly, much to everyone's annoyance. And they were also even more annoyed when Madeline confirmed while they were cleaning that there would also be more training after this. Ash and the gang and Team Rocket had split up to do the cleaning, and when Jessie and Meowth were finished, they were completely exhausted and didn't want to do anything but sleep, but James eagerly reminded them that they still had to find a way to take the Golden Slowpoke statue. Soon, Ash and the gang and Team Rocket meet back up with Madeline so that Madeline could explain that the next bit of training was fishing, just like the Slowpoke did, believing that fishing would really help a person get into their thoughts. Ash and the gang eagerly go and get fishing rods and ask Team Rocket if they were going to join them for this training as well, but Team Rocket declines as they saw this as an opportunity to have Ash and the gang and Madeline be occupied with fishing, leaving Team Rocket alone and able to steal the golden statue. So they made up excuses as to why they couldn't fish, stating that they were too tired and James had a few cramps and Jessie had a headache, trying to come up with actual believable ways, and it seemed as though these ways were believable enough, as Ash and the gang believed them and went to go leave to fish, but not before Misty commented how she would not miss out on the chance to fish, regardless of any headaches or cramps, and stated that Team Rocket must have just been extremely old and unable to handle the pain. Upon being called old, Jessie was enraged, and James and Meowth had to keep themselves from laughing at Jessie's anger. Ash and the gang and Madeline then left toward the lake from earlier to go fishing, leaving Jessie and James behind, as Meowth had decided to go with Madeline and Ash and the gang as well, in an attempt to nab some water Pokemon as an additional gift for Giovanni. With Ash and the gang now gone, Team Rocket, specifically Jessie and James, begin formulating a plan to get the gold Slowpoke out of the building, and Jessie comes up with something, determined after Misty had called her old to prove that she could still do something. As for Ash and the gang, Madeline and Meowth, when they arrive at the lake, they see that Slowpoke was still there, and Ash questions why it had refused to move anywhere, leading Madeline to reveal that the Slowpoke's goal was to become a Slowbro, and apparently, because of tradition, most of the Slowpoke evolved into Slowbro while they were at the lake, so Slowpoke thought that if it was going to find out its true self and evolve into Slowbro by doing so, then it would have to stay at the lake. And she also explained that the Slowpoke happened to be hers as well. Apparently, the Slowpoke must have believed that fishing would help it evolve, as it proceeded to catch a Goldeen with its tail, followed by a Lantern and a Magikarp. Ash and the gang and Meowth were busy watching the Slowpoke, wondering what it was going to pull up next, but Madeline reminded them that they had to train as well, so they should get fishing. And Misty eagerly did, as she was a water Pokemon master, she claimed, and fishing was easy for her. Unfortunately for her, though, she was just shown up by the Slowpoke, as she couldn't get anything at all, and Slowpoke was able to fish up a fucking Gyarados. As Ash, Brock, and Meowth failed to catch anything as well, Misty fell to the ground in dismay, having lost patience at the fact that fishing was her specialty, and she was a water master, and yet she couldn't even catch any water Pokemon, or even a cold for that matter. Her anger was not helped upon seeing the Gyarados that Slowpoke had fished up, as Gyarados was her least favorite Pokemon, despite it being a water type. Due to having lost patience, Misty comes up with another idea, which was to force Meowth to go into the lake and talk to all the water Pokemon in there and ask them why the fuck they weren't biting her fishing rod. Meowth didn't want to go, thinking that Misty was crazier in her anger than Jessie was, but Misty forcibly threw him into the water, and he heard all of the water Pokemon, including Chinchou, Magikarp, Seaking, and Remoraid, state that they didn't want to be caught by a human's fishing rod because they knew that if they were caught on the fishing rod, then the human would catch them in a Pokeball, and they didn't want to be caught. They wanted to be free. Also adding that the reason why they would willingly be fished up by the Slowpoke was because they knew the Slowpoke had no intention of capturing them, and it would release them back into the water, only wanting to fish in an attempt to evolve. Meowth comes back up outside the lake and tells Ash and the gang of all this, with Madeline confirming all of it as well, as she knew what the water Pokemon were like due to being at the temple for so long. Ash and the gang all get frustrated at this, but Madeline reminds them that the entire goal of the training was to learn more about themselves and remain calm even while they were fishing. So basically, they shouldn't be losing their shit over failing to catch anything, because that wasn't even the goal to begin with. Just then, though, Slowpoke managed to fish up a Shelder. Madeline claims that the reason why Slowpoke was able to catch this Shelder was because it wasn't trying too hard and was focusing on discovering itself and its own thoughts, and as a result, it was able to calmly catch the Shelder. Ash, Misty, and Brock are amazed by this, finally understanding what enlightenment would require, being full concentration and determination. Speaking of full concentration, back at the temple, two students sitting in front of the golden Slowpoke statue were meditating and had their eyes closed, being very focused, so they didn't notice as Team Rocket stole the gold Slowpoke statue by putting a rope around it and then attaching said rope to bikes as they pedaled the bikes away, taking the Slowpoke statue with them. Eventually, Jessie and James are able to take the statue out of the temple and begin going away with it, eventually coming across the lake and almost running into Ash and the gang since they were pedaling so fast. Ash and the gang had only heard a faint rumble before seeing the golden Slowpoke statue heading straight for them, about to kill them due to its weight. However, in a Deus Ex Machina moment, since the Shelder had bit onto the Slowpoke's tail, Slowpoke finally evolved into Slowbro, much to Madeline's delight. Ash and the gang go to run away, confident that they were about to be run over by the statue, but Madeline and her Slowbro stay behind, since Madeline was confident that her Slowbro could deal with the statue, as she then orders it to use confusion to levitate the Slowpoke statue up over the lake, detaching it from the bikes, and the force of this detachment sent Jesse and James flying off of the bikes. Slowbro then used confusion again to throw the Slowpoke statue back to the temple as it landed back in its original spot, perfectly fine. With Team Rocket gone, Ash and the gang thank the Slowbro for saving them as Ash uses his Pokedex on it. Brock then comments that Ash and the gang would have been fucking killed if Slowbro evolved a moment later, and wondered why it was able to evolve just at that particular moment. It was obviously because it was a Deus Ex Machina moment, Brock. Come on. No. Madeline justifies that it was because Slowpoke had finally reached enlightenment and mastered all of its thoughts, congratulating her Slowbro, stating that she always believed that it could. And also adding her theory that Shelder likely helped Slowpoke reach enlightenment and become a Slowbro, since Shelder was responsible for Slowpoke's evolution, so therefore it helped Slowpoke clarify its own existence. Ash and the gang were now disappointed at the fact that they couldn't seem to become enlightened, even with all of this training, but Madeline comforted them, reminding them that she wasn't fully enlightened either, and began to give some cringy pep talk like, true enlightenment was knowing you can do better today than yesterday, and as long as you trusted your Pokemon, that was all that mattered, because maybe your Pokemon were enlightened, and you could take some advice from them. Adding that the more friends, whether people or Pokemon, you had, the easier it should be to become enlightened, because you can learn about yourself from hanging around others. With that, Ash and the gang agree to bond with their Pokemon more in hopes to reach enlightenment, as Madeline agrees to do the same with her Slowbro. Ash and the gang then notice that Team Rocket were still knocked out on the ground, and believe that they should face punishment for stealing the Slowpoke statue. Madeline reveals that she wasn't going to punish them, but she was rather going to try and train them more, and hope that they could see their evil ways and master their thoughts to become good. Ash and the gang doubted this, and decided to leave, wishing Madeline luck with Team Rocket, and stating that they had a Pokemon League to get to. So with that, Ash and the gang said goodbye to Madeline, and departed on their way to Blackthorn City. As Team Rocket eventually regained consciousness, and were forced to stay at the temple and meditate to achieve enlightenment. Team Rocket were annoyed by this, but they were even more annoyed as they saw a Delibird outside through a gap in the building. They knew that this was the Team Rocket Delibird that was there to collect their loans, so they initially tried to avoid the Delibird and eye contact with it. But they begged the Delibird to help them out and try and get them out of the temple. However, all of the students, as well as Madeline and her Slowbro, heard Team Rocket talk to the Delibird and punished Team Rocket for not being quiet while meditating, as they all slapped them with wood planks relentlessly. Team Rocket's screams could be heard as they kept screaming for hours and hours on end. The screams were so loud that they could even be heard outside.